Welcome, everyone, to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller. I represent Secretary Phil Ng here. You want to put up the first slide? You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. Read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostmpo.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Kurashi of the MPO staff at iquraishi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting, or obviously if you're in the room, raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
MassDOT seat 1.
This is David Moeller.
MassDOT seat 2.
Michael O'Dowd, present.
MassDOT Highway Division.
MassDOT Highway, John Romano here.
MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnston here for the MBTA.
Regional Transportation Authority's Metro West Transit Authority.
Jim Nee here.
Massport.
Good morning, this is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
Sarah. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
MBTA Advisory Board. The Advisory Council.
Hi, Carl Alexander from the Advisory Council.
City of Boston seat 1.
Good morning, Lydia Housley for City of Boston seat 1.
City of Boston seat 2.
Nayeli Rodriguez for City of Boston.
At-large city, City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty representing Mayor Van Campen in the City of Everett.
At-large city, City of Newton.
Ned Codd representing Mayor Mark Laredo.
At-large town, Town of Arlington.
Good morning, Leonard Diggins representing Select Board Chair John Hurd, Town of Arlington.
Acknowledging, thank you. Morning, Aaron. Could we get the volume increased a little bit for those on the phone? Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville Intercore Committee, and representing Mayor Jake Wilson.
Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Lexington.
Good morning, Megan Roach, Town of Lexington, representing Select Board Chair Jill Hay for the Magic Subregion.
Good morning. At-large town, Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green, Town of Brookline.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, representing the City of Framingham, Metro West Region.
North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Good morning, Erin Schaefer, City of Beverly, representing Mayor Cahill and North Shore Task Force.
Morning, Aaron. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Melissa Tintopolis, representing the North Suburban Planning Council. Also, our alternate, John Strauss, is here. We'll be sharing kind of the position here at a certain point.
Thank you. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Chris Diorio, representing Hull Select Board Chair Erwin Nessoff.
Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Hi, Rachel Benson here representing Swamp and Chairman Gallo for Rentham.
Hello, Rachel. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the Town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Morning, Tom. Do not see the Federal Highway Administration. With that calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Next item on the agenda is Chair's report, and I don't have any today, so we'll go directly to Tegan's Executive Director's report.
Thank you, David. Mr. Chair. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's nice to see you all in person. If you could go to the next slide, please. I just have a very brief set of updates today. I've been talking to you all and introducing new staff. We won't do that today, even though we've continued to recruit and bring on more folks. But the next slide, I just want to let this board know, and anyone else watching, waiting for the next slide, sorry. That we are hiring for 2 additional positions. So if you can share those with your networks, please, and help us recruit excellent people, I would greatly appreciate that. And then the next slide, please. So for today, hopefully you all are already very aware, but our primary work to do is to ask this board to vote to adopt a final program of regional projects for the 2026 to 31 TIP. So today we'll be focusing a lot on the remaining funding that's available in certain years of the TIP, including looking at the earlier submitted and scored MBTA and RTA projects. You'll also hear from folks from the MBTA on the capital investment plan. And then also MPO staff will give an update on the long-range transportation plan and ways in which we will be asking you to get involved in that process in the coming months. Next slide, please. And just lastly, our next meeting will be 10 a.m., the normal Thursday time on April 16th. It will be fully virtual again. And at that meeting, please expect a number of work scopes for your approval and some adjustments, modifications, amendments to the current TIP, 26 to 30 TIP. And you'll also hear from MassDOT on their capital investment plan. And so with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public comments. And we have some people signed up to speak today. And I think there's 3 people from the city of Malden, Jim Tarr, Ali Duark, and possibly Joe Zisman, who is, I think, their consultant. So if the 3 of you want to come up in any order or all at once, feel free.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. Just wanted to speak in strong support of Broadway reconstruction for placement on the 2027-2031 Transportation Improvement Plan. It is going to be nothing short of transformational. This is a roadway that is sorely needing investment. It is a regional freight corridor. It is a corridor that currently lacks complete streets facilities. This project will be able to do it all. And also have some good news, slightly unrelated to Broadway reconstruction. We have been working on Spot Pond Brook Greenway as well. This was a project that, we were seeing costs go up, and I'm very happy to report that based on the revised 25% design submitted to MassDOT, we are able to ratchet that cost down from $8 million to $2.58 million without contingency. So it won't be $2.58 million, but it will most certainly not be $8 million. And we just want to reiterate that the City of Malden is ready and willing and prepared to be a strong regional partner. We want to move projects forward in line with your project readiness policy, do it on time and on budget. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please feel free.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ali Durak. I work with Jim every now and then. I am the president of Malden Safe Streets, and we advocate for accessibility for all. So we appreciate all that you guys do. And I'm here to advocate for the Broadway Corridor Framework Reconstruction Plan. I would like to highlight what Jim just said about it being a freight corridor. So as a resident, I'm there standing there on the sidewalk watching these large trucks go by. I am a mother and I help advocate for crossing guards. So I'm down there watching the crossing guard step in front of large vehicles because they're passing very quickly and not stopping at the red lights because the infrastructure just isn't there yet to help the cars and the freights understand that you should slow down at the intersection. So I'm here to advocate for updating Broadway, and I hope the project goes through. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Are there any other public comments at this time?
We have two online.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me who they are, Rebo?
Sure. Marianne Cohen, Malden Safe Streets, or Malden Chamber of Commerce.
All right, Mary Ann Cohen.
Hi, thank you. Marianne Cohen, Executive Director of the Malden Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here on behalf of the Chamber to speak in favor of, the Broadway reconstruction and its placement of the TIP for 27 through 31. We support this funding for the project as it'll make a critical regional corridor safer, as well as improve efficiency for the movement of people and goods in Greater Boston, like the two prior people said. The investment will also help unlock economic development, which as the Chamber we really favor. The development potential and help all forms of transportation ranging from pedestrian and cyclists to commuters and commercial freight vehicles. So thank you very much for this consideration.
Thank you. Ibu, who's next?
And then Jonah Sharenza, Bike to the Sea.
Jonah Sharenza, Bike to the Sea, please.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my comment. I'm also speaking in favor of Broadway and am, as a executive director of Bike to the Sea, excited to see a project like this advancing to complement the investments that the Commonwealth has already made in the East Coast Greenway along the Northern Strand Trail. I think this is going to provide great connectivity to and from that trail and that investment and continue to produce a more viable network of alternative transportation that's going to help alleviate congestion in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there more?
Yeah, finally, Noah Took, Malden Safe Streets.
Could you say her name or his name again?
Noah Took.
Thank you, Noah Took.
Yes, I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus of support for the Broadway project. This is a corridor that I walk along frequently to get to certain, community institutions like Idle Hands, which is a great community event, and the Minuteman Press, which I use to print posters and flyers promoting community events. So I think improvements to this road are greatly needed, and others have given great reasons. So I just want to say that, as a community member, it's a very valuable place for improvement.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu, very much. Any other comments in the room? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Do we have any? Tom?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee met last on March 26th. Staff provided updates on project cost changes that have been identified after the March 19th MPO meeting, and provided an updated picture of the funding balance of the regional target program following decisions made by the board on the March 19th meeting. Staff provided an update to committee members on the full list of scored transit projects under consideration for using those surplus funds. There is insufficient regional target funding to consider for using these surplus funds. There is insufficient regional target funding to support all of these projects. And so staff previewed 12 different combinations of projects to the committee that each reflect different MPO priorities. Next, staff provided an update on project cost increases trends across the different stages of design. Staff project further cost increases of approximately $200 million among funded projects currently at or before 25% design alone, and that's without counting the largest projects currently on the TIP. Afterwards, staff reiterated that 7 projects that submitted funding applications for this TIP meet the minimum pre-25% design threshold for funding. These 7 projects amount to approximately $140 million, and 5 of them have already submitted 25% designs to MassDOT. The committee discussed how fiscal constraint in later program years will preclude funding any of these new projects without making cuts to the current program. This is a similar situation to last year's TIP, and 4 of the applicants for this year had also unsuccessfully applied during that cycle as well. The committee learned that between a combination of these 7 projects, the 12 projects the MPO has voted to fund for design, and 6 other projects funded by other design grants, there is a backlog of at least $435 million worth of construction projects alone that will be seeking funds over the next few TIPs. Assuming no project C increases or delays, staff also project that less than half of the regional target funding available in 2023 may be available for any new projects. Lastly, staff emphasized how the board has adopted tools and strategy intended to mitigate these cost risk and reopen the project pipeline, but that much more work is required even after the adoption of the FY 27 through 31 TIP. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Seeing none, are there other committee chairs reports at this time? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Community Advisory Council report. Carl?
Hi, good morning. Carl Alexander, serving here in capacity as Vice Chair for the Advisory Council. Since the last board meeting, the Advisory Council met once. We welcome Michaela Grenier as our new point of contact for the MPO staff. We're very much looking forward to working with her and really express a lot of gratitude to Gia and Sean as well for stepping into that vital role and continuing to support our efforts. At the last meeting, we discussed the pending updates to the MPO's public engagement plan. The core objective is to ensure our outreach strategies remain effective, inclusive, and transparent. This work is especially critical now as we enter the heavy lifting phase of the TIP and UPWP development cycles. We need to ensure that the public's voice is baked into the foundational documents from the start. In addition, we continued our listening tour and received updates from our advisory council members who kept us grounded in local and advocacy-based contexts. Specifically, we heard from Bike to the Sea regarding regional trail connectivity and programming, and the Codman Square NDC on community stabilizing housing and transit investments and transportation for Massachusetts regarding statewide coalition building and capacity building. That's all I have for the update today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions for Carl? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 5th, 2026. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record. Eric Barrasso.
Eric Barrasso, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Dennis Giambetti.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Certainly. David Muller.
Yes.
Michael O'Dowd.
Yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Yes.
Jim Nee.
Yes.
Sarah Lee.
Yes.
Eric Barassa.
Yes.
Hannah Switlikowski.
Yes.
Carl Alexander.
Yes.
Lydia Housley. Yes. Nayeli Rodriguez.
Yes.
Jay Monty.
Yes.
Ned Codd.
Yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Yes.
Tom Bent.
Yes.
Megan Roach.
Yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Yes.
Aaron Schaefer.
Yes.
Melissa Tentaklis.
Yes.
Christy Oria.
Yes.
Rachel Benson.
Yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an action item, federal fiscal year 2027 to 2031 Transportation Improvement Program discussion, development stage 3. Ethan LaPointe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am a senior transportation planner with MPO staff. This presentation here today, if we can please go on to the next slide, is to just continue discussions around the development of a final program of projects for the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 draft TIP. If we can go on to the next slide, please, to provide a brief overview of what today's presentation is going to look like. Staff are going to provide a brief update on the fiscal constraint of the draft program, just versus project changes that have occurred since recent MPO meetings. I'll also reiterate what the objective of today's meeting is, review some of the materials that staff have made available for today's meeting for reference by both folks in the room in the form of printouts, but also posted on the MPO meeting calendar for reference as well, and then provide a review of projects that submitted applications for funding this past fall for consideration in the nearer term years of the draft 2731 program, specifically federal fiscal year 27 and 28. Culminating then in next steps, just vis-a-vis how decisions that staff are going to request from the board here today relate to the later and eventual meeting to discuss the release of the draft tip. So with that, if we can please go on to the next slide, and the next one, please, to provide an update on fiscal constraint. There is one project change within the draft program that staff wanted to highlight before going further into discussion. At the March 19th MPO meeting, the MPO board voted to approve a cost increase for the Boston Street Improvements project in the city of Salem based on a 100% design submission. That cost increase was originally flagged as an increase from $25.16 million to $28.15 million, a 12% increase at that stage. Staff have since learned that the cost estimate has been revised after review of the 100%, now up to $29.74 million, approximately 18.2%. Now, it is worth noting, if we can please go on to the next slide as far as what the impact is on fiscal constraint, that there is a slight difference between that figure I just mentioned and this table. This is because there have been a couple different revisions to the project cost estimate over these last few weeks. Last week, we presented to the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee that the cost estimate was actually about $30.5 million. And this table that's on screen here actually illustrates what it would look like if the project was at that elevated level. So the bottom line here is that for purposes of today's discussion, there is over $47.7 million available for programming in federal fiscal year 2027. It's more like $48.5 million. And in federal fiscal year 2028, there's $47.78 million available for other funding uses in those years. So that is just the update between the March 19th meeting and today based on just continued review of that 100% design submission for the Boston Street Improvement Project in Salem. With that, if we can go on to the next slide and the following one, please. Just provide, again, a review here. I just alluded to some of the various MPO meetings in which staff have been presenting project information to members of this board and others. This is, at today's April 6th MPO meeting, the sort of final step or final plan step for the adoption of a final program of projects for the 2027 to 31 TIP. At the end of this meeting, staff are going to request the board to move to adopt any list of projects that it may wish to see included in this final program or any other changes to the program, and then vote to adopt that final program of projects for that draft TIP. Again, building off of MPO meetings around this draft development that began all the way back in the middle of February and also fomented by several meetings of the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee to review additional project level information provided by proponents in the lead up to these meetings. And again, on the next slide, I'll just reiterate in terms of text what I just said verbally, that the primary objectives here for today are to allocate unprogrammed balances of funding in federal fiscal year 2027 and 2028, and then to adopt that final program of regional target projects for the draft 2027 to 31 TIP. To support these requested decisions, if we can go on to the next slide, and I'll slow down a bit here just for folks online to pull these materials up. There's a series of different materials that staff have prepared for reference today. If we go on the next slide, based on the decisions that the MPO board made at the March 19th meeting, there is a draft program available on the MPO meeting calendar that reflects the sort of draft tip, reflecting any of the changes the board has voted to make to that program thus far, and the most recent cost and readiness information for all of the current program of projects. This program does not include any of the new projects that we're going to be talking about here today. Again, this is just a snapshot of sort of decisions made to date, but what may be helpful for members to just remember and identify where specific projects, even if they may not be discussed directly today, fall into this draft program. Moreover, at the bottom of this table is also a table that shows fiscal constraint across each of the 5 federal fiscal years of the TIP. There's also additional information in the columns for each of the individual projects listed, describing when the project may have been first included in a TIP, and whether or not the project is slated for delay between federal fiscal years 2026 and 30, the current TIP, and this next 2027-31 TIP, among other project level information as well, such as its current design stage, how many years it's been since the project has submitted a design milestone, it's been recorded by MassDOT, etc. So all of that information is included in that table that is listed on the MPO meeting calendar. I believe we have also printed out a few of those today for folks who are in the room. Moreover, if we can please go on to the next slide, as far as the new projects available for here today, staff have reposted the project descriptions document, which was prepared for the March 5th MPO meeting, listing the scores of each of the new projects that are under consideration for programming in the 2027 to 31 TIP. While today we're talking about the projects that are seeking funding for 2027 and 28, that project description document includes descriptions for all of the projects that submit applications, including the ones seeking funding in the later years of the TIP, such as fiscal 2030 and 31. So this is sort of a comprehensive list, but we also wanted to just direct members towards that document to see project descriptions, estimated costs, scores, and the readiness status for all of the various projects that could be slated for consideration under this program. And then more directly, if we can go to the next slide, please, there's also a document related to transit project bundles. These are informational bundles. To describe what this is, in response to various sort of interests or indications that different MPO members have provided, such as, for example, whether or not certain projects may perform better against one specific MPO goal area, or the prioritization of the project proponents as far as what proponents wanted to see, a sort of a ranking of different projects. Staff prepared about 12 different bundles and combinations of transit projects for MPO members to consider when moving to make decisions around the adoption of various projects into the draft 2027 and 31 TIP. So again, these objectives generally across these 12 either include the priorities of project proponents, the highest scoring projects, the projects that may align with a specific MPO or goal area, like for example, state of good repairs or nuts and bolts projects, focuses on a specific transit mode or a geographic spread, such as a geographic distribution of funding across each of the various municipalities and parts of the region. So again, these are informational only. Staff just wanted to recognize that thanks to a lot of the hard work that some of our partners did this past fall at these various transit authorities, there is an unprecedented quantity of various projects up for consideration here, and there is insufficient funding to fund all of them. So we want to sort of prepare these to help narrow down that field based on different areas and based on individual board members' priorities. To go into these specific projects individually, if we go on to the next slide, over these next few slides, I'm going to be talking about each of the individual projects just at a high level as far as what they are that are in this list. Also reiterate that again, because this has been a somewhat iterative process for developing this program, some of these projects are already incorporated into that draft program spreadsheet that I alluded to earlier. They are listed in those blue rows that you may see in that spreadsheet. On this slide, as far as what's being presented here, they are listed in green as ones that have been subject to consideration or in previous action by a board member or by the board at a recent MPO meeting. So for example, starting off with the 4 projects that the Cape Ann Transportation Authority applied for under this TIP, the Access for All project, the Dialysis Transportation project, and Magnolia Shuttle projects were all voted to be incorporated into the program at either the March 5th MPO meeting or the March 19th MPO meeting. I'll also note some of these projects were voted to be incorporated at the March 19th MPO meeting in the form of Amendment 3 to the federal fiscal year's 26-30 TIP, which is still out for public comment right now. The 4th project, which is not highlighted here from the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, is the Vehicle Replacement Project, though the authority is only seeking funding for that in federal fiscal year 2031 for this project, based on the anticipated end of the useful life of the vehicles that they'd be replacing. If we can go to the next slide, this takes us into the projects submitted for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. The procurement of 10 compressed natural gas vehicles for $3.4 million was addressed as part of the Amendment 3 to the 26-30 TIP, leaving 2 projects that have yet to be funded and are included in the bundles listed here today in some combination. The construction of the Vehicle Maintenance and Fueling Facility for the MWRTA. That has a full request of $38 million. However, it is scalable depending on the scope of work down to approximately $20 million for a more different sort of vehicle power plant scale. And that other form of power plant that could be accommodated at a $38 million price point is hydrogen fuel cell powered transit vehicles for $15 million. That other project, which is somewhat contingent on the full funding of that $38 million facility. If we go to the next slide, just to continue, I'll also reiterate here that given the MBTA provided a fairly substantial list of projects, in doing so, the MBTA had also indicated its own priorities for what it would wish to see the MPO fund first among those lists of projects, referring to them in different ranks. So starting here, there are 5 projects that the MBTA has classified as its rank 1 priorities for the board to consider. As far as unfunded projects, it is the Symphony Station Accessibility Project for $35.6 million, a locomotive procurement project for $50 million, and I'll note that is also a scalable request either at the $25 million or $50 million stage for either 4 new diesel locomotives or 2 battery electric modular unit or BEMU locomotives for $50 million again there, or 25. And then the high priority stations accessibility improvements project for interim station accessibility improvements at Wellesley Hills, Melrose's Cedar Park Station, and Belmont Station for $18 million. And then the North Station Rapid Transit Flooring Replacement Project, which includes both planning, design, and construction work to support accessibility improvements at the Orange and Green Line platforms at North Station. So again, those are the ones that the MBTA has indicated are its highest priorities for the board to fund. The Downtown Crossing Vertical Transportation Improvements Project was incorporated as part of Amendment 3 back on March 19th. If we go to the next slide, we then go into rank 2 projects. Starting off with the Franklin Line Double Track Improvements Project Phase 3 for improving service reliability and frequency on the MBTA Franklin Line at $45 million, a unit substation upgrade and replacement project for $16 million to improve power system reliability, and then also the Haverhill Line Double Track Improvements Project for $7.5 million. That is a design-only project, so it's only design work. There's no construction funding associated with that, at least under the request being made to the MPO here today. We go to the next slide, taking us into rank 3. Some of these were funded either by previous MPO board action at the Amendment 3 or even as part of the 2630 TIP when that was being developed. That first one being operational enhancement of bus routes 714, 716. That was incorporated at the March 5th meeting, as was the Better Bus Project operational safety improvements at bus stops, March 5th. The remaining project there is the bus priority and accessibility improvements for the Program for Accessible Transportation Infrastructure at $6 million. And last but not least, on the next slide, please, we have one slide for ranks 4 and 5 for these last 3 projects. Power Systems Reliability Program for $10 million, a Silver Line Tunnel Flood Mitigation Project for $15.52 million, and the Blue Line Tunnel Airport Flood Mitigation Project for $22.58 million. So with that, as I've just listed all of the various projects that were submitted by these authorities, which is consistent with the list of projects presented back at the March 5th MPO meeting, I'll just again reiterate that the quantity of funding sought by all the various transit authorities and partners here for funding well exceeds the amount of funding available in fiscal 27 and 28. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm not going to necessarily go through each of these in turn for the purpose of time and to facilitate more time for discussion, but there are 12 different combinations of all of those over a dozen projects that I just went to that would fit within fiscal constraint. I'll use one as an example if we go to the next slide, please. So, for example, the highest scoring projects, and these are the projects that had the highest scores when MPO staff conducted the evaluation of these projects back in and presented them to the board back at March 5th. This table shows how the current balance of available funding in federal fiscal year 27-28 would stack up against an example funding schedule for some of the projects that had scored the highest as far as MPO scoring. So for example, the highest 4 scoring projects would be MWRTA's construction of a vehicle maintenance facility at a $25 million scaled down level, the bus priority and accessibility improvements for the MBTA, Blue Line Tunnel flood mitigation at $22.58 million, and Symphony Station accessibility. At the end of each of these bundles, you can see a subtotal amount that shows the total amount of funding that would be programmed in that year, and then a remaining balance row for each of these. So again, we're just using this one as an example. There's 11 others that are structured in a similar fashion, but the remaining balances roughly show how much is left over should the board wish to adopt one of these or modify one of these different bundles. I'll also reiterate from what I said earlier, based on the fiscal 27 amounts that you might see as far as remaining balances for each of these, there's about an extra $1.5 million there that's not currently being shown based on that revision to the Boston Street improvement cost estimate. So with that, if we could actually just scroll ahead, maybe about 11 or so slides through all of the various bundles which are listed here in case a member would wish to refer to one specifically. I'll reiterate that the requested actions here today are that the board first identify any further scored projects for inclusion in the draft 2731 regional target program, that the board afterwards then move to adopt a final program of projects for inclusion into the 2731 TIP. That will then allow staff to use that final program of projects to develop a draft TIP document, which would be held for a vote to release that draft for a 21-day comment period at the May 7th MPO board meeting, that comment period lasting until the end of May, for endorsement then at a meeting in June. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about what's been presented here today or during the discussion of these different items.
Thank you. Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions, one for you, Ethan, and one for the T. With regard to the scoring, is that scored on the same scoring matrix that we use for all of our projects? Or is it specific to this? My thought to that is we sort of tuned our scoring metric to kind of municipal projects, not necessarily for big agency projects, and that's okay. But I want to make sure we're applying sort of a similar goal or set of goals to these projects, even though they may not score the same.
Yes, so I believe 2 years ago, when the Transit Transformation Program was formally incorporated into the TIP under the most recent LRTP, we adopted scoring criteria specifically to evaluate transit projects under that program. There is only one set of criteria for all forms of transit projects, so it's a fairly wide net in terms of evaluation, but it does have its own criteria set.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not applying like complete streets to a station accessibility project, right? Like that's, different. Second question was for the T, just with the locomotive procurement. Is that specifically for the regional rail initiatives, either at Fairmount or on the North Shore, or is that just new locomotives for the system generally?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Great question, and I'll invite my colleagues, Mike and Josh from our capital planning team, to add any detail that I missed to this answer. It would allow us to establish a baseline of reliability, but it is also helping us increase service levels toward that goal of a regional rail transformation. The battery electric locomotive procurement element of it especially would help us electrify service on the Providence line and potentially on a few other routes as well. In general, anything that goes toward increasing frequency and reliability on the system is part of that kind of broader regional rail process.
Okay, but these aren't the specific train sets for the Fairmount line, which were...
No, this is separate from the Fairmount line. That is a separate procurement process.
Okay, yes.
Other questions? Yes, Steve?
Land online.
Lynn Diggins? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ethan, would you be able to show us the bundle for the regional, or show us the regional bundle?
So there are
Oh,
three.
you have several. Okay. So all right. Thanks. And I see the PDF is up, so I can scroll through them too. Can you go to the one that has the MWRA project? Okay. All right. And that one leaves $4 million. So do we have a good sense about the cost and containment of these projects? Not the right way of saying it, but are the costs that we're looking at, especially for fiscal year 28, likely to be the cost, the full cost of the projects?
If I may ask a clarifying question, when you say cost, are you referring to the transit projects or the other regional target projects currently funded in 28?
No, the ones that we're under consideration now, so yeah, well, that is a bigger question now, isn't it? But no, for right now, just the transit projects.
Numbers that the proponents provided for the formal request of the MPO. Additional requests to cover cost increases would be subject to the MPO, but I'll defer as far as the possibility for those estimates to be accurate or change in the future to the project proponents to answer that part of the question.
All right. Okay. I think I mean, that's a good enough answer. All right. I mean, are we at the point now, Mr. Chair, where we're advocating, for anything, or are we, or just still just question and answer?
We're still discussing, Lynn. I mean, you can advocate at any time for anything you would like, but we're still discussing. I think there's going to be other members who want to have discussion about other projects or some of these projects, but feel free to advocate anytime you want, Lynn.
Okay, well, I'll just say that I like the regional mix. I like this one with the MWRA project. And what I like too is that it also scored. It fit into the high scoring projects. And to the extent that the scores will be kind of exemplify our goals. I think that's great. What I particularly like about this is that it is forward thinking. And I know we don't have like a particular metric, or criteria for that. I think that's a good thing for the MPO to do. I'd like for us to be kind of known, at least by ourselves, to ourselves as being bold and looking forward and trying things. And of course, sometimes when you try things, you learn that maybe it wasn't the best thing to do, but someone has to be, the first one to try something. And I think, this is a good project, and it scores very well, and it scores particularly well on the equity, component, which I value a whole lot. So for any mix that we choose, I would very much like to see the MWRA construction project in that. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lynn. Other questions, comments from MPO members? Derek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe Ethan or Jim, maybe you could speak to the scalability of the Metro West RTA construction vehicle maintenance facility. I see like the numbers have, sometimes it's like 20, sometimes it's 25.
So yes, this facility is, if it's fully realized, is around a $40 million facility with hydrogen electric infrastructure built in. Obviously, we separated the vehicle portion of the request because as we do research on hydrogen electric, we find that your infrastructure needs to probably be several years, up to 5 years in advance of the actual vehicle procurement. It's quite advanced infrastructure. So the heavy-duty maintenance facility itself is something we don't currently have. This is sort of a backbone piece of infrastructure that most transit agencies have that we do not. We have light-duty maintenance, and we've begun procuring heavy-duty vehicles, partially with the help of this MPO, and that's sort of a standard piece of operations for bus operations. So we're maintaining those, the current heavy-duty vehicles in a space that is definitely sort of too small. So the base project without hydrogen in it is approximately $25 million. It's scalable down to that. So as we design this infrastructure, we'll be designing it both as the current technology that we have, which is heavy duty and CNG, but we're going to make sure that it's designed in such a way that essentially it can be layered with hydrogen technology on top of that. So it's scalable down to about 25 million. The full facility cost is right around 40.
Okay, so 20 million here. Would you say that's not enough? Like you need another 5?
I would say 20 would probably not be enough. I'd say 25 is sort of the floor of the scalability.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions, discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Sandy?
Just wanted to respond quickly to Len's question for the T. We've tried to kind of honor the MPO's commitment to the design guidelines by bringing projects that are very advanced in the design phase, and they are kind of scaled to the midpoint of construction. We're pretty confident in those cost estimates.
Thanks, Sandy. Other questions, comments, discussion? All right, I have some. So switching gears, there are highway projects that have been suggested for inclusion, yes?
Yes, they're in that project description list, though. They are not scored.
Yep, but like, Malden came today and talked about their project and, not that you should ever necessarily count how many people came, but a lot of people made the effort to come. They talked about how invaluable their project is. So each of these projects has a TIP readiness policy year. That's based on our commitment to the policy, yes?
Yes, and actually, if I may, we do have some slides that might help with this. We could go
sure, that'd be
more
great.
slides forward.
Thanks.
So if we could go back one, please. These are the projects that submitted applications for roadway project funding.
And so then they do have scores.
Yes, I misspoke. The unscored projects were the two statewide highway projects that were originally flagged, which were not scored, but these are scored as their municipal proponent.
And because they're all under our policy 2031 or beyond, they're not, there's no money in 2031, right? There's $300,000 or whatever.
If we can go to the next slide, please. That one shows fiscal constraint between 2029 and 31. These projects either under the readiness guidelines fit under 2030 or 2031. However, based on cost estimates, none of the 2030 projects, or really none of the projects, would fit in 2030 either.
Okay. Okay. So I don't think there's anything to do today on that, but I am concerned with Tom's comments earlier that we have cities and towns spending money, getting projects ready, and we're sort of like maybe 2032 if you're lucky. I don't know how to address that today. I don't expect us to address that today. But we need to figure out a way collectively, and I think a lot of this is possibly going to fall on MassDOT, to try to move some projects faster so that when we come to this discussion and there's $80 million available, there's not cities and towns who have highway projects going, well, wait a minute, why are you taking that $80 million and not giving me my project? Again, nothing we can do today, but I am mindful that there's a problem and we need to try to address it. Now, Ethan, for filling the transit fill-ins, how would you like us to proceed, or do you care?
I won't provide any direction as far as which of the 12 different options that staff necessarily prefer, but I would say it would be helpful to have one of those 12 be advanced. I will note, per the prior comment, which may have emerged around that regional mix version 3, I'll remind members that there is also a reserve of transit transformation set aside in federal fiscal 28 to the tune of $6 million. So if there is a sort of delta as far as scalability on a specific project, there's even more funding available in 28 should the board wish to allocate it now. So we have on paper in terms of unprogrammed about 47.7. That goes up to 53.7 if you draw down the $6 million of transit transformation reserve, which was intended for applications for this fall.
And now let me ask you another question. So for the MBTA projects, you've noted here where you've actually slid in a tier 2, right?
So when you say, are you referring to in the slides or in the project descriptions sheet?
I'm referring to this thing.
That one I would need to pull up right now to confirm that.
Right, like so the reason I'm getting at this is I think, you know, we all share, well, not all of us necessarily, but I share Lynn's commitment and value to the MWRTA facility, right? Jim's told us he needs at least $25 million. The T is also prioritized, right? Like they didn't necessarily go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down to however many they had, but they prioritized in bands.
Exactly.
And sometimes in order for financial constraint to work in some of your whatever we call these bundles, in some of your bundles, you've slid in a tier 2 project or a tier 3 project or whatever, right? And but that's noted here, right?
Yes, so there are some, for example, there's a bundle referring to highest priority MBTA projects.
Yep.
That one includes a tier 2 project due to fiscal constraint.
Got it.
And 2 tier 1 projects, but not all tier 1 projects, for example.
All right, so we heard Lynn talk about how he liked regional mix. I don't know, I think number 1, but I'm not even not sure which, because there's 3 regional mix.
I think it was version 3.
Okay. Dennis?
Yes, I'd just like to highlight and echo both Jim and Lynn's comments, especially around the Metro West RTA, for two reasons for my thinking anyways. One is that it's the highest ranking project, and it also fits that regional equity, regional mix that we all cherish. I think it's important. So for that matter, I'd like to see support the RTA project, facility project.
I see, but give me a second. So I have another question for, I think, the T on this. So Jim has told us that his project is scalable down to 25 million. There's a T project for $50 million for locomotives. When we've scaled it, we've only scaled it down to 25. I need to make sure that 25 is actually an appropriate amount. And is it the only appropriate amount? Like, is it that you're buying, and I'm making this number up, everybody, 10 locomotives, and they're 50 million, and you can buy any, we can fund 1 to 10, or is it, we're buying 4, and you need to find, you can't give us less than we need to at least buy 1.
So I will say two things, and then I'm going to call in Mike, I think, to give more detail on this. First, Symphony and the locomotives are our two highest priorities. We'd like to see those included in any scenarios that advance. But Mike, maybe you can answer the question about the scalability of the locomotive procurement.
Thanks, Mike. Introduce yourself for the record, will you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Malia. I'm the Deputy Chief of Capital Strategy here at the T, overseeing the capital plan in our grants group. As it relates to the locomotive procurement, this is for a 20 locomotive procurement, 10 diesel, 10 battery electric locomotives for a total cost of, I believe, $378 million. We had $156 million programmed in last year's plan. Any funding we get for this will be incredibly important for us to be able to even maintain the level of service that we have right now, as we know that we are struggling with reliability due to the age and condition of our locomotive fleet. Replacing these vehicles, and this procurement also includes options for, I believe, 40 more that we will need to procure as well over the next 5 years. So this is, in terms of 25 versus 50, this is a way of putting it into something that's concise as to this specifically is what those funds could get. But if we scale down, we would still absolutely be able to make use of those, and they would be tremendously important for our program.
Right, so just so I'm clear, and let me just say, I don't want to scale down, certainly don't want to scale down below 25, but just if we, for some reason, needed to, we could scale down to, like, obviously there's no point in giving you $1 million, but we could scale down because we're filling a funding gap, right? You already have a program and you know what you're doing, and we're helping you fill a gap that you need to be filled to meet your program.
Correct, and also this is a procurement that is actually active right now, so these are very much estimates, whereas Symphony or otherwise, we have much more defined costs.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Any discussion, comments, questions? Anybody want to make any proposals? Go ahead, Eric.
I just wanted to follow up on something Ethan said. So I'm just looking at that regional mix number, version 3. So Ethan, in 2028, we've already programmed a placeholder for another $6 million for transit transformation.
Yes.
So you could add $6 million on top of that to what you already have here in the scenario. So, and I mean, there's still 4.6 remaining in 27 and 4.1 in 28. It seems like we could easily, between all of those funds, we could easily figure out how to get Metro West to 25 and still have, remaining funds.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Lynn, is that Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually happy that I went after Eric because, that clarified a whole lot. It makes me be even more supportive being of regional mix version 3. I was about to say, let's just go for the highest scoring projects, but I understand the need for the locomotives. It doesn't really give much or anything really for locomotives. And Sandy just said that the locomotives are a very high priority. So I'm now, given the answers that Eric just got, leaning very heavily towards version 3, the regional mix.
Okay. Other comments? Dennis?
If I could make a motion this time, then?
Has anybody got any other comments or discussion anyone have before?
I have a question comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So then with the programming for 2027, the work that's been put into the bundles has been very helpful to understand like the different priorities. Could maybe Eric on the MPA or the MAPC, in terms of looking at it regionally, you put in some thought in this, or the team has as well. I'm just kind of curious, I haven't heard more discussion from some of my fellow board members on what maybe is more valuable in terms of the bundles. I mean, thematically, I get that, but then I'm trying to get a sense of like what people are thinking before we make a motion, if that's okay. And your regional perspective would be helpful.
Sure. I mean, and Ethan, I can look to you too. I assume what makes this regional is the fact that the locomotive procurement is serving the entire, the commuter rail system is sort of serving the entire regional rail. So that, as opposed to Symphony being just like one station in the city of Boston, the bus priority and accessibility improvements are also going to be spread among the bus network, so that makes it regional. And then obviously Metro West RTA, we're giving funds to the, outside of the urban core, where I think when we look at our TIP, the majority of our funds are. So I would agree that this is a very regional, we're spreading funds around the region that are going to serve the region as a whole.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And so, Ethan, I have a question before we make a motion on anything. So sometimes a project costs X amount, and then sometimes a project costs Y amount. And I understand the scalability, but Symphony costs $35 million. And if I'm doing my math right, I think we're carrying 35.6 for Symphony. All right, if I look at the first page of this thing, all right, it says Symphony's a $35 million project, and then if I look at Symphony on page 1, it's 35.6. Is that intentional?
The 35.6 is what we've been carrying in here. There may be a discrepancy on the written project descriptions page.
That's all right. But 35.6 is the number.
That is the number. I will note as well that similar to the locomotive procurement, there is other additional CIP and grant funding that the MBTA has also assigned to this. So it is part of a larger cost as well.
Right. Which, again, I guess theoretically makes it scalable, but why would you? Okay, other comments? All right, Dennis, I'm going to let you make a motion. Carl. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Carl. Thank you.
Hi, Carl Alexander, Advisory Council. So just wanted to clarify, so there are new capital projects for consideration. So, I wonder if you can clarify a little bit more. So they're being introduced, but not considered in terms of fill-ins or regional mix. I'm just trying to better understand that.
Carl, just to clarify, are you referring to those 7 roadway projects municipalities submitted?
Yeah, so is that separate from this discussion?
Those would be considering other programming years that would be separate from this discussion.
Okay.
As they are not at a sufficient readiness level to compete for fiscal 27 or 28, though consideration for funding those projects would be subject to the adoption of a final program of projects.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Right, but that, again, just to be clear, that's based on our policies.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. We could decide that we want to do a bunch of highway projects, but based on our policies, we don't think they'll be ready.
Okay. Thank you.
But I would also I need to note this for the record. If they start to get ready, we'll have another discussion next year about whether they should be slid in place of something else that we funded, whether that be a different highway project or a transit project or whatever, because we do this every year. Because it is so much fun. Dennis, I'm sorry, Eric.
I mean, I'll just make a comment. I think I think this regional mix 3 is a good one. I know, Dennis, I think you're about to make a motion. I think for all the things we just talked about, spreading funds around the region, addressing one of the T's top priorities, addressing a Metro West RTA priority, supporting the commuter rail system, the regional bus system. I think this is a good one. I appreciate all the work that you've done, Ethan, with the bundles. A little overwhelming trying to go through so many different scenarios, but understanding the more options is always better. And so I definitely support this and just wanted to make those remarks.
Jim?
Just a quick question based on some of the previous comments and the hopeful goal of scaling this to 25. Ethan, would it be reasonable to have, say, like 3 million or some portion of the delta between 20 and 25 million come from the transit transformation set aside, say 3 comes out of that, so there's still money there for the T or CADA or whoever in that year, and then 2 million come out of the 4.17 million that's remaining?
That is within fiscal constraints, so yes, that's doable.
Since we're talking, I personally do not support funding a tier 2 project. Okay, I don't think there's a reason to spend all the money just because we have money. There are going to be cost overruns in FY27. There are going to be possibly highway projects that we don't know about. There may be other transit priorities that pop up. So that's just my own personal bias. The T did a lot of hard work and said, hey, we've got priorities. Here they are ranked. And I don't think we need to spend every nickel that's in front of us today. But that's just me. Eric?
So your proposal would be to leave some funding in 27. So that would be what, like 4.699
I'd
plus
move the
3.
$3 million from bus priority down to Metro West because we got to fill the $5 million gap, right? And then I'd either take $2 million out of the remaining, so that takes care of Metro West because I believe we should fund Metro West at $25 million. Okay, and then I would take out bus priority 2, but in 28. But if you want to start it in 28, that's fine because it's just a placeholder at that point, right? I don't actually care, right?
I mean, to your point about.
Although I got to say, I do love buses, and I feel like I wish we funded more for buses.
Yeah, but you raise a good point, which is we could make that decision at a later time based on leaving a little funds for cost overruns, which. We have a track record of of crossover runs. So I'm very open to that, proposal and discussion too.
Others? Sandy?
Just want to note with regard to the bus priority and accessibility improvements, that one is highly scalable. So there's some flexibility there in terms of when we encounter cost overruns later this year or what ends up being left in 2028. Obviously, it is tier 2. It is still a very high priority for us. But it is the kind of thing where if there's, $1 million, $2 million in quote unquote spare change here and there, they can be added to that project in different years.
Ibu? Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm in favor of, I understand what you're saying about the bus priority. I am very much in favor of doing whatever we can, to make buses work better, but given the scalability, and I think it's very prudent that we do leave a little bit of a cushion, well, actually more of a cushion at times. I'm in favor of what you suggested, so thank you.
All right. Dennis, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, just a clarifying point. Sandy, if we left the 3 million in 27 and we took 3 million out of 28, would that, if I understand what you said, that would be fine with the T? You're just looking for dollars?
I think so. Again, looking at my colleagues in capital planning, but we can spend the money in whatever year it is in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just so you know, my preference would be to take the 3 million in 27 out of bus priority, stick it in the Metro West line.
In 27?
Yep, in 27.
And you can do 2 years, Jim?
Yes, as long as the bulk of the funds are in 28, some portion of the funds, 10 to 20% in 27 works.
So I guess so that's a good question, Jim. If we gave you, is it better for you to get 3 in 27 or can you take 5 in 27?
We could do 5.
All right. So my thought was we'd take 3 million from bus priorities, stick it in Metro West, and then take 2 million out of the remainder to make Jim whole for 25 million. And then you can just leave the other 3 million programmed in 28. That's just a marker of we care about buses and we want to fund buses if possible, but it doesn't like take every penny we have and shove it into a program. Jay?
On that point, Mr. Chair, is everything in 28 really more of a placeholder at this point anyway? I mean, 28's a year away. We're going to go to the tip.
Yeah.
So it's,
yeah,
that's true of everything, right?
Right. And again, to the local cities and towns trying to get highway projects ready. Please keep trying to get your highway projects ready. We're mindful of this problem and we want to try to solve it if we can in the future. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
On the 25 million, do we have the design and readiness status on that?
Jim?
It is pre-design.
Pre-design.
Yeah. The transit projects have different readiness, though, based on the way the funds are transferred and the way the funds are spent. Essentially, once they are available from the federal government, we have about a 5-year period to complete design and construction, which is based on our experience and based on our history with these types of projects, we are able to complete them on budget and on time.
Okay, thank you. And then just the other question, obviously, you know, especially in the inner core, we're always concerned about bus priority and accessibility. So what we're saying is that would still be on the table for 28?
Well, if somebody makes that motion, that's what I was thinking in my own head. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Other questions? Seeing none. Dennis, do you want to make a motion?
Well,
I asked you before and we never got to.
That's fine, but I'm trying to follow what your suggestion and what others feel comfortable with. And Eric, so why don't you make that motion and I'll second.
Okay, I think I'll make the motion that if we use the regional mix version 3 scenario, what we're doing is we are zeroing out in federal fiscal year 27 the 3 million for bus priority and accessibility improvements. And we are moving that into the MWRTA construction of vehicle maintenance and fueling facility. We're also moving 2 million of the remaining balance to make that line item in 2027 $5 million. I think that is the change to that scenario, correct? Yep. So that's the motion that I will make.
And is there a second?
I will second it.
Discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Moeller.
Yes.
Michael O'Dowd.
Michael O'Dowd, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano. John Romano, yes.
I don't even.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Jim Nee.
Jim Nee, yes.
Sarah Lee.
Sarah Lee is a yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski.
Hannah Swilakowski, yes.
Carl Alexander.
Carl Alexander, yes.
Lydia Housley.
Lydia Housley, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez.
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
Ned Codd.
Ned Codd, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Aaron Chute, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Benton, yes.
Megan Roach.
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Aaron Schaefer.
Darlene Wind is here now for Beverly. I'll abstain only because I wasn't here for the full conversation.
Understood. Thank you, Darlene. Melissa Tentaklis.
Melissa, yes.
Chris Diorio.
Chris Diorio, yes.
Rachel Benson.
Rachel Benson, yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
This motion carries.
Thank you. Ethan, do we need another motion to do something now to wrap this all up?
I believe, I mean, if that is, unless there are any other changes, staff can use that as the final program scenario, I think.
Do you need us to do a motion to do that, or are you good to go? I'm happy to do it either way, Ethan. I don't care. Your pleasure, dude.
I think that should be sufficient. I won't make everyone vote again for that same list. So,
Thank you, Ethan.
all right, thank you.
Good job, as always. Next item on the agenda is the MBTA Capital Investment Plan. Josh Klingenstein and Mike Malia.
All right, thank you very much. Who is controlling the clicker? Okay. We can go ahead and start. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Malia. I'm Deputy Chief of Capital Strategy here at the T, and I'm here to present the proposed FY27 to 31 Investment Plan, or CIP. Next slide, please. So in accordance with Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, and Interim Secretary and General Manager Eng, the proposed MBTA FY27 to 31 CIP continues to deliver near-term results for our riders while laying the groundwork for future service improvements. The MBTA's 5-year fiscally constrained CIP is driven by 3 key objectives: regular maintenance, building for the future, and improving service for our riders. Next slide. So the CIP is a rolling 5-year plan, as you guys are aware, that accounts for all of our available capital sources and committed uses over the next 5 years. It's updated annually to calibrate funding source assumptions, integrate a new year of funding, and program those sources towards individual projects and ongoing MBTA programs. On the slide, you can see we've broken out the major stages of our CIP development process. It's a year-long effort that began in the fall when we opened up our call for projects. Those requests were evaluated by MBTA staff and then vetted by leadership. After analyzing future funding availability, those requests were prioritized, leading to the final funding recommendations in this proposed CIP. When we kicked off the FY27 to 31 CIP back in September, we anticipated that existing commitments to major projects would substantially limit new funding availability when compared to previous years. As a result, we changed our approach to new funding requests, focusing on bringing in-flight projects to completion and continuing critical state of good repair programs before any consideration of new scope. This framework allowed us to successfully navigate a challenging bidding market and an uncertain federal funding environment. Next slide. Now, an important question for HIS is, how does the CIP fit into the TIP? Each year, the MBTA submits its program of federally funded projects to the Boston Region MPO for inclusion in this region's TIP. The CIP also includes many projects that are supported by MPO regional targeted funds. In the MBTA CIP, this is a 5-year fiscally constrained plan that includes all of the MBTA's planned capital investments. Investments are funded through federal, state, MBTA, and reimbursable funds, and this plan aligns to state fiscal years. Whereas for the Boston Region MPO TIP, the Transit Improvement Program is a 5-year capital plan for the Boston Region's MPO's planning area and includes all transportation projects receiving federal funding over the next 5 years, including transit projects. Next slide. Now, before we get into the details of the FY27 to 31 CIP, I want to recognize some of the achievements and some of the strategic directional changes we have made over this last fiscal year. In particular, we are continuing our investment in annual program maintenance and track improvements. We've worked to resurface over 150,000 feet of track and restored 50 to 50 mile an hour speeds on key segments. And we are continuing our commitment to getting rid of slow zones. We are not going back to 2023 or 2024 before we consider any other investments. Also, as it relates to the Fairmount line, over the past year, we've replaced over 28 miles of rail in the Fairmount line with more infrastructure improvements in the works to support the introduction of battery electric multiple units, or BEMUs, for future service. And we are also changing how we are doing business itself. We have moved our bus overhauls for our CNG fleet in-house. This is a very major decision for us and we're very proud of, and it's a new area for us to try and work on. This will allow us to integrate more cost-effective methods of fleet maintenance. We're starting with a pilot of midlife overhaul for the CNG fleet, and we're using internal sources which can offer significant savings and provide, we're hoping, a better product. Next slide. In other areas, we're seeing the Foxborough Station improvements. We've expanded capacity and upgraded accessibility at Foxborough Station, in part in anticipation for FIFA this summer. We have also expanded our ferry fleet with 3 new vessels procured over the last year, and we are continuing our dedication towards system-wide signal modernization. Red and orange line signal modernization has been a long ongoing project, but both systems will cut over before the end of this fiscal year. We are continuing to progress green line train protection system to prevent collisions and improve overall signals there, in addition to ATC, PTC, and regional rail. But as part of this CIP, one of the bigger things we are doing is we are now going forward with a blue line signals modernization plan, in addition to some planned state of good repair work that will be taking place this fall. Next slide. Now, as I alluded to, the FY 27 to 31 CIP continues to program significant MBTA sources and federal funding to three major initiatives: North Station Draw 1 bridge replacement, the procurement of the new Type 10 Green Line vehicles to replace and modernize that fleet, and then the Green Line Core Capacity Program. $451 million in state funding has helped reduce the MBTA's core capacity funding burden. This is a program of 17 different projects that will begin construction through 2035, totaling $4 billion. We are working to get $2 billion from the feds. That's what we've requested. I think there's some slides later on this one, but the state's contribution here has been critical in our ability to try and get our match level up to what we need to secure those funds. And you can see, just looking at this graph here, in terms of the impact of these three programs, just from last year's CIP to this year's CIP, bringing in another year of funding, but also seeing some cost growth in those areas. Over $755 million in new funding, or funding that was not in the previous CIP, is dedicated toward these projects. It has a long, long shadow on our CIP, and will continue to have one. Next slide. Now, with that being said, with that long shadow, the additional state funding that we have received over this past fiscal year, in particular the $850 million from the expansion of the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, leveraging fair share revenues, has been transformational in what we can do in this CIP. We are now finally able to move forward with Arbor Way Bus Maintenance Facility, fully funding that project at $380 million, $371.5 coming from the CTF. We are also fully funding Wydette Regional Layover Facility to enable for 6 tracks, electrified tracks, to support layover for the Fairmount BEMU service. $370 million for Green Line infrastructure investments, part of that 451 that I mentioned earlier. And in this portion, $20.6 million for locomotive procurement. Our CIP right now is very much designed around these 4 projects, and in particular, locomotive procurements. In this CIP, the 20.6 is supplementing nearly $200 million in other new funding that were required to bring this project up to full cost, while we're still going through the procurement and navigating an uncertain bidding market. But maintaining our service reliability, and to be frank, improving it, is really critical on commuter rail, and it's one of our biggest investments we've identified right now. We're also very appreciative of the state for $81 million in federal match funding for our Green Line Core Capacity program as well. Next slide. Now, one of the things that we are continuing to work on, and I mentioned a little bit about the CIG program, we are continuing to pursue federal funds, especially in the discretionary front, and particularly through the federal government's largest grant program, the Capital Investment Grant Program. This program's major transit capital investments, requiring transit agencies to complete a series of several steps to obtain funding that can take years. The MBTA is in the process of seeking CIG funding for 2 major programs, and you may have heard about these in the news over the past month as well. One of them is for small starts, the Blue Hill Avenue Transit Action Plan. We are seeking $80.3 million to implement bus lane rapid transit via center running bus lane, and these funds have been appropriated by the federal government, which is excellent news for us. These funds are not currently in our CIP, as there are still additional steps we need to go through to actually secure these funds, and we only program those funds once we have the confidence that we will actually receive them. Similarly, we were able to get $100 million appropriated for our Green Line Core Capacity Program, as part of a $2 billion request that we are making of the feds, and that is really critical to support the new Type 10 vehicles and increase overall system capacity. These will be programmed in future CIPs once the funds are better secured, and also for core capacity, as we also further identify our own local match, which is going to require $2 billion of state or MBTA funding to be able to enable the remaining federal commitment. So there's those going on, and we're also being very aggressive in our other grant applications, including recent applications for BUILD and the FSP grant program, FSP National. Next slide. Now, talking about the FY27 source assumptions, what we see on the screen here are two stacked bar charts, and I'm going to go through that kind of an orientation as we walk through here. On the bottom, we have our federal funding, and if you look at what we had in FY26 to 30 versus FY27 to 31, we actually see an increase in federal funding here, but that is a little bit of a mirage, or at least it's misleading. We have $4.1 billion in this CIP in federal funds, but we're actually experiencing a decrease in formula funding assumptions. We're able to increase our federal funds here through continued success in discretionary grant programs and the continued impact of the major award we received last year for North Station Draw 1 through the Mega Infra program. Then looking at state source, at MBTA sources in the middle there, there's a pretty substantial decrease there. And so this is a little bit misleading as well. This is in part, the decrease we're seeing here is due to the level of activity within our current fiscal year. We are yet again on stage or on schedule to spend over $2 billion of investment in this fiscal year. It happens to be more bond focused rather than state or federally funded. So there's that aspect there, but we also are seeing experiencing a decrease in our bond issuance assumptions in our out years, turning responsible debt levels in our operating budget pro forma, reducing our MBTA debt assumptions from $650 million in annual issuances through FY29 down to 590 in FY30 and 31. We anticipate that we'll have to stay at that lower level in future fiscal years just to make sure that we are being responsible in the operating budget as well. And then looking at state funding, we're seeing a substantial increase in state funding here, reflecting the impact of the expanded dedication of fair share sources and revenues for the CTF. Of the $2.1 billion we see here, it's very interesting to note that 75% of this funding was added just in the last 2 years through a couple of one-time funding infusions that are critical for us, but they're also only one-time sources. Part of a structural challenge that we have going forward in terms of matching the kind of output we're trying to do, $2 billion or more worth of work a year with declining sources coming in. Next slide, please. Now, I will say this CIP and this CIP process over the past year has very much been an exercise in understanding and quantifying long-term uncertainty. While the new state funding has enabled long-delayed major projects, we have significant funding source uncertainty right now. On the federal policy front, as everyone in this room should be aware, IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, expires at the end of this federal fiscal year, and we do not have a new surface transportation authorization. That means all of our formula funding assumptions for the remaining CIP are very much assumptions that we are having to make here, and that makes this very uncertain going forward. We are also seeing declining funding sources. Now, without structural changes to capital funding, we will not be able to maintain investment at the current levels. Just over the past year, as we've had to recalibrate our federal funding assumptions, we've taken away about $212 million of formula funding that we would have anticipated to program this fiscal year, because we received lower overall apportionments in FY25 and then have used that as our baseline going forward through FY31. If we receive additional funding, or if the things change with surface transportation authorization and how that gets done, obviously it will have a major impact here, but we're going to be navigating substantial uncertainty. And again, we're also, as many of you are, encountering a challenging construction environment. We continue to see significant cost escalation across our capital project portfolio, and materials sourced from outside the U.S. have high uncertainty in pricing. Next slide. Now, taking a 10-year outlook, this is a chart that we have presented over the last 3 or 4 years, just to show what we have in terms of how we are programming funds. This is meant to just simply reflect sources when they become available, not necessarily when they are intended to be spent. And we're seeing that 10-year source availability estimates for federal funding, they're going to be remaining at our assumptions for FY26 levels. And no new state funding is assumed beyond what has already been programmed. Again, as I mentioned, we've We have absorbed a loss of $212 million from what our assumptions would have been, which has led to a more constrained CIP this cycle around. We were very fortunate we did not have to actively decrease our CIP and defund projects mid-year once we received the FY25 apportionments and understood their impact, in part due to infusion of other federal and state funding, in particular discretionary grant awards as well. And again, as I mentioned, MBTA bonding capacity is assumed to decrease. We are seeing our overall CNAI, or our catalog of state of good repair backlog, continuing to grow. There'll be more information that comes out about this as the new CNAI is done. But as you're seeing here, without new structured sources of funds, we are going to be very challenged to try and maintain the investment that's necessary to keep a healthy and vibrant system going. Next slide. Okay. Turning to the CIP itself, starting overall orientation, we've changed how we are characterizing some of our investment programs. We have retired 2 programs that had a long influence and a heavy influence on this on our CIP in the past. That'd be South Coast Rail and GLX, and we are replacing them with the next series of mega projects that we are working on: North Station Draw 1 and the collective Green Line Core Capacity Program. Next slide. And as we look at new funding availability, bringing some of those previous slides into context here, the vast majority of our projected CIP funding is for previously programmed projects, in particular those 3 big projects that continue to have out years there. $8.6 billion of the $10 billion in our CIP is for previously programmed projects. We have new state funding that has enabled 4 major initiatives to move forward: Arbor Way, Core Capacity, WIDET, and our locomotive procurement. The remaining funding was considered available to program of $473 million, of which we took nearly 200 right off the top, just to make sure that we would be able to go forward with this locomotive procurement. It is absolutely critical for us, and we're very appreciative for the vote you guys have already taken today, but it will continue to be top of mind for us in the coming years as well. Next slide. Now, looking at this in terms of how does our CIP break down, there's over 680 projects for a program spend of approximately $10 billion. About $9.8 billion of that is programmed for reliability and modernization projects, while just under $200 million is for expansion projects. You can see the 2 charts here on the left, program spend by CIP program, and also spend by mode. We see rapid transit, regional rail, and system-wide modes outpacing others. Vehicles absolutely has a very, very strong impact and on this CIP, not just for those the locomotives there, but for the Green Line Type 10s, for a number of overhaul programs we have going in addition to more bus purchases. Next slide. And if we're looking at just the overall largest investments we're seeing here, it's highlighted by North Station Draw 1 with over $960 million allocated within the CIP. Green Line Core Capacity follows close behind at nearly $870 million. And then with a number of other major projects or project efforts here, locomotive procurement, Arbor Way, and station accessibility projects in particular. And for those who are interested, since we are changing the framing of the core capacity portfolio, this is how these projects would have mapped into our old structure for guideway signals, power, maintenance and admin facilities, and business and operational support. We'll continue to try and provide this sort of a breakout going forward, just so people can put the right context in how we are framing this and what the scale of investment really is. Next slide. Now to go through and take a look at these for our overall modal overview. For rapid transit, the CIP is very much focusing on Green Line upgrades with over $2 billion for upgrades on the Green Line, including $1.4 billion for infrastructure and facility upgrades and nearly $600 million for the procurement of new Type 10 vehicles. For signal system modernization and state of good repair, we have $109 million to continue critical state of good repair work, including the initiation of our Blue Line signals modernization, and just also highlighting the continued investment we have in our track programs with nearly $220 million for special track work, materials, and renewals to continue our improvements. Again, we will not be going back to 23 and 24. Next slide. Looking at bus. This is highlighted by major investments within bus facility modernization. We have $126 million for the completion of the Quincy facility, another $380, as I mentioned, for Arbor Way, and over $400 million for bus vehicle repairs, upgrades, overhauls, and procurements, including $79 million in a recent FTA Low-No grant award to replace our oldest buses with new hybrids. Next slide. Looking at regional rail, we have over $620 million for investments simply within our fleet, including procurement of new bi-level coaches and the renewal and replacement of our oldest locomotives. $260 million for regional rail modernization, planning for infrastructure, including the Wydet build out there, and along with a fair amount BEMUs. And then the giant in the room, North Station Draw 1. This is now a $1.3 billion project to replace and expand the North Station Draw 1 bridge to increase network capacity and improve safety. Next slide. On ferry and paratransit, we are continuing our investments within the ferry system, including vessel, facility, and terminal renewals, dock upgrades at Hingham and Quincy, and ongoing system modernization. And for the ride, we are continuing our investment in the ride's vehicle fleet, in technology upgrades, and in consolidation of the operations control and call center and our mobility center. Next slide. Now, looking at those things that touch more than one mode here. For the bridge pipeline, we have over $280 million for critical bridge repairs, rehabs, and replacements, including $133 million for the bridge program pipeline itself to reconstruct our prioritized bridge needs. For structured inspections, a very healthy chunk, nearly $120 million for safety critical structural inspection programs that will help us then prioritize long-term programmatic efficiencies and improvements. And we are also going through to replace the existing operations control system with a new centralized train control project, new train control system. This is what actually makes all of the, at least the subway vehicles move in terms of actually being able to deploy them and coordinating there. This is a very old system that we have right now, and it is very much time for it to be renewed, and it'll be something that should increase efficiency, safety, and service quality going forward. Next slide. Now, I mentioned before that this was CIP was an exercise in funding uncertainty. Some of that uncertainty actually can be beneficial to us. And that includes some additional funding sources moving through here. The MPO is one area where we are very appreciative for any support we're able to get. The state is also considering additional investment for locomotives and is included in the Chapter 90 bill that is moving its way through the legislature right now. And there are still some other things that could change, including even our formula funding assumptions. We are getting a better handle now as new apportionments have come out, and we are recalibrating what our formula funding assumptions should be through FY31. What that does mean is if additional funding becomes available, we want to make sure people are aware of where we are prioritizing this investment, just so people can make informed decisions on this. Includes a commuter rail mini-high program, critical technology investments, our employee and passenger safety upgrades, improvements for our maintenance and administrative facilities, power, and in particular, a big one here, the Saugus and Manchester Drawbridge rehabilitation. This is a project we were not able to accommodate in the current CIP, along with additional investments for track. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the timeline here, we have gone through and presented to our board in terms of the draft CIP. We've done our first public meeting. We are currently in our 21-day public comment period. Next week, we will have our second public meeting. This one will be in person here at 10 Park Plaza before the public comment period closes on the 17th. There'll be some other presentations, but as we go through right now, we'll be recalibrating what the CIP can do, both in terms of some changes in funding assumptions on our own. There are some updated costs that we'll be getting in terms of cash flows as well that will be resulting in a final CIP to be presented in May. And any comments that we receive, either here that we're unable to answer or through the public anywhere else, we will make sure we have high-level responses for public comments available on mbta.com and appended to the final CIP in June and July. Next slide. And for public engagement, we are in the middle of our public engagement cycle, as I mentioned. We very much appreciate any comments we can receive. We very much want to hear from municipalities, from our legislative friends, and also from the public itself. You can make your comments by attending any of our public meetings, using our online comment tools, send an email, or even postal stuff. Some stuff still actually moves through the U.S. Post Office, and we will incorporate those things as well. I would also say for anybody who's particularly interested in more long-range vision as to what we'd be trying to do, what we would trying to prioritize going forward, and especially if there are questions about expansions or things that you'd like to see in 10, 20, or 25 years. We are also in the midst of we've recently kicked off the PMT, granted this time as Focus 2050. They're also in their initial public comment period, and any comments that we receive will also be shared with the PMT, and I definitely encourage especially for longer range visions, people to participate and engage in that. We really, really, really want to hear from you. I believe that is that. Next slide. Yes, one more. TIP development. So we will be presenting our proposed FY 27 to 31 TIP program amounts in our project list at the April 30th meeting for this MPO. And if it is approved, the transit elements of the TIP will then be released for public comment. A vote to endorse that will then take place in May. At this time, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Questions? Jake?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a question on your formula funding assumptions. And
yes.
In the early years, you showed the state funding actually almost zeroing out. And
yes.
I'm curious, maybe explain that some more, what's happening?
Certainly. If we can go back to that slide, I want to say it's about slide 12, just for context here. Double check that one. But when we are programming the slide, sorry, a little bit further back, is the one with one more, two more? There we are, here. So what we have done here in terms of programming the state funds, this is reflective largely of the 2 CTF infusions we've received over the last 2 years, along with legacy funding for some of our vehicle procurements and I believe red line, orange line structures. When we program our sources from the state, we program as available when we use them because we seek reimbursement from the state. The fact that it shows this tailing down, this is actually a much better picture than I would have shown you last year. And it's simply because we do not have a regular recurring source of funding from the state. We are completely reliant upon for recurring sources for our formula funds and for what the MBTA can bond ourselves and afford through our operating budget. For formula assumptions, we have assumed a decrease in overall formula funding. We had projected last year that we would have about $443 million in FY 26 funding and had that carried out through FY 31. We received 411 last year instead. It was the first time we actually saw a decrease during the BIL era in our formula funding, and we've had since recalibrated our sources assumptions based
on that note, we all know there's a new federal reauthorization that's going to be taking place the next couple of years, fairly well before 2036.
Yes.
So that's going to impact this potentially.
Everything that we're seeing here in blue is for formula funding is simply what we feel is a conservative factor to take, but we know that we could be overly optimistic. Maybe this is very conservative. That would be wonderful. But seeing what comes through this Congress is a challenge, and especially to try and make funding decisions based upon that. Is there a more specific question you have?
No, I just wanted to highlight to folks like this is a bit bleaker than we might all hope. So, and how important the state funding has been to advance so much of the progress you guys have made, and you've made incredible progress in the past few years. But it's largely due to that state infusion, and I think folks ought to.
We would never have been able to get to the level of spend and the level of progress we've been at. This will be the third year that we've gotten to nearly $2 billion over the last 4 in terms of spend, and that has been almost entirely due to state infusions of funds for South Coast Rail and GLX, and now this expansion. But we still need more. I hate to say it. We still need more.
So I got somebody online, but I'm going to go to Dennis and then Jim and then Eric, and then I'll come to you, Ibu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. Has the T come any closer to making a decision between battery and diesel on the locomotive procurement?
We will be doing both.
Okay.
We are going to be going out. The base procurement is for 10 vehicles, 10 of each variety, 10 diesel, and these are modern diesel engines. They're much more cost efficient, much more fuel efficient, much less emissions generating, and 10 battery electric locomotives. This procurement also includes options for up to 40 more locomotives of each variety, so that we can then leverage this procurement as our infrastructure continues to improve, as we see what makes sense to try and continue to electrify. But we know we absolutely will still continue to need diesel locomotives going forward. It takes a long time and a pretty penny to try and electrify our entire network, but making sure that we can provide consistent, reliable services, we view the best thing we can do to try and help with this, the climate crisis right now and decarbonization efforts.
And is the infrastructure for battery electric included in the numbers?
So the infrastructure for the battery electric, right now, the 10 locomotives will be targeted primarily at the Providence line as we'd be taking advantage of Amtrak's catenary already on the Northeast Corridor. These are battery electric vehicles so that they will be able to also run on battery power for some shorter runs otherwise as we get to the full 10 that would be delivered. I don't believe we have specific lines targeted for those or if they'd be dedicated to a specific line at this point. There's more that needs to be figured out there. We will also need to have more investments overall, even on that Providence line, just to have the maintenance facilities to support those vehicles. That'll be coming in future CIPs.
Jim?
It was very nice to see that the CNG midlife overhaul is being brought in-house. Can you talk a little bit more about that from a operational perspective? Has that already started? Have you already seen the cost savings? Not farming that out, which is often standard in the industry. That's wonderful that you're seeing cost savings there.
So we started this back in the fall. I believe it was in October or November when we made the decision to bring it in-house. And I believe we had our first, we had to place some materials orders, but we actually started these, the overhauls in-house, I believe, in January. We have seen some cost savings. We have seen our cost assumptions thus far hold out. And I would say this is something where we actually have seen tremendous cost avoidance as we were able to fund right now the full program for all of those CNG vehicles for the same price that would have been just for 1/3 of it when we were projecting it before. Trying to outsource that and go to the market would have been prohibitively expensive, and we've seen tremendous cost escalation on our overhauls otherwise. So we are trying to move these in-house. Thus far, it has been a success, but it is also still early days.
Well, that's wonderful. I look forward to advocating for a public partnership to take advantage of that. That's quite wonderful.
We are definitely looking to try and build that capacity, and something that we're particularly excited about this year.
Eric?
Thanks, Mike. Is there a climate resilience program in the CIP? I noticed that some of the projects that were in the mix for the MPO funds were like tunnel flood mitigation projects.
So we have climate resilience projects kind of sprinkled throughout our CIP. We don't have that treated as its own CIP program in terms of reporting out on there. We will be reporting out with the final CIP on our progress towards at least bus electrification and decarbonization in compliance with legislation there. It is an area that we are also obviously very much focusing on, but it's something that I think we know that there'll need to be additional investment going forward. We are dealing with those challenges now.
Ibu? Lynn?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to follow up with what Jim Lee was saying about the overhauls. I'm really happy to see that coming in-house too. And at the advisory board, I forget the gentleman who met with us who also described more work that he is doing in-house because that money stays in the Massachusetts economy for one thing. And then the last thing that Jim said, the public-private partnership. Can you expand on that a little more? The possibility of that? And may I have a follow-up question?
I know that our general manager is eager to build up our capacity here for that potentially be something that can support other RTAs, in addition to just building up capacity to support all of our fleet as well. It's not something that we can speak any plans to specifically right now. This is our first effort through here, but it is something that he is excited about.
That's great, because I was going to ask that question, and I thought you might laugh at me, because I think it would be great, if it could become a source of funds, for the T. So great, this is wonderful. Thank you.
There'll be many lessons learned from this one, but we're excited about it.
Jay?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just again, offering my enthusiasm for Jim's comments and Len's comments, bringing stuff in-house. Question on that, is that still considered capital funding? Like when you bring a service like that in-house, is it now operating funds or is it still capital?
It's still capital funding, still capital renewal. The manpower costs for that are being charged explicitly to the capital project. Indeed, much of the stuff we do for vehicle maintenance, we have a very robust program there. And if it's for the even reliability-centered maintenance that we do for those vehicles, if it's to improve those assets, it's on the capital side. They do a number of other things in operating, but no, this is a capital funded item.
Okay, great.
Other questions? Hannah?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation. I think it's great to be able to present it. I've heard it many times now, but I think it's great that the MPO has a role in this process. And I think for municipalities that serve on the MPO or that are watching this presentation, your 10-year outlook with the emphasis on the declining of state funds, this is why we need so many of our municipalities to continue to advocate in terms of transportation funding and just really understanding the financial impact, I think, even for the MPO in terms of where the finances and how everything is put together. So I'm really pleased that there are more presentations around the CIP and just also that understanding of what the CIP is and how municipalities and our organizations that serve also on the MPO fall into this whole process big picture, because the fact of the matter is more than likely the federal funds are very iffy, so to speak, or gray area in terms of like the foreseeable future. So I think it's really important that we continue to have these conversations and to just really understand the process moving forward. So I know at the advisory board we have many presentations coming up on this and certainly look forward to continuing to partner.
Any other comments or questions at this time? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Nadia.
Oh, yeah. The city just wants to applaud the MBA's continued commitment to decarbonization, and we're looking forward to more opportunities to collaborate on resilience work as well that benefits both infrastructure and people.
Terrific.
Any others? Thank you, Mike. Excellent. As always, man.
Thank you very much.
Next up is the Long Range Transportation Plan update. Aaron McGuire.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erin McGuire. I am a transportation planner with the staff to the Boston Region MPO, and I am here to give you an update on our long-range transportation plan. If we could go to the next slide and the one after that. First, I would like to provide some background about the long-range plan, or LRTP, for anyone who may need a refresher or is new to the board since the endorsement of our current plan, Destination 2050. The LRTP is one of the MPO's 3 key federally required certification documents that are at the center of our investment and planning practices. These are implemented through the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, and Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP, respectively. The long-range plan establishes a vision, goals, and objectives for the region's multimodal transportation system. It identifies strategies to help achieve these goals, and it also outlines the MPO's capital investment strategies, again, implemented through the TIP. Since we last spoke about the long-range plan, the Boston Region MPO has shifted from a 4-year update cycle to a 5-year update cycle due to changes in classification that are related to federal air quality standards. Our last long-range plan, Destination 2050, was endorsed in the summer of 2023. We are anticipating endorsing its update in the summer of 2028, with that long-range plan being effective during federal fiscal year 2029. Our long-range plan activities are developed in collaboration with many of the peer organizations here today, including MAPC, MBTA, and MassDOT. Next slide, please. Destination 2050 contains a wide variety of information. It documents the region's existing transportation system and assesses associated needs. It describes a vision, goals, and objectives for the transportation system, which is developed through extensive engagement. And it also outlines the intended outcomes of MPO work and investments that we strive to achieve. The plan also establishes various investment programs that help to direct the MPO's regional target funding, as you have all seen today. The LRTP's financial plan allocates funds to these programs and also to projects that are regionally significant major infrastructure projects that need to be integrated in our cumulative plan analyses. These analyses include air quality conformity, greenhouse gas emissions, and our disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis. Next slide, please. Over the next few months, you will notice an increase in board conversations as we are going to be increasing some activities related to the long-range plan. Currently, MPO staff are finalizing the content of an update to the MPO's needs assessment, which we are planning on sharing with you and publishing in this summer. And this will also include a review of the vision and goals that were established in Destination 2050. Additionally, we'll also have some initial conversations about potential performance measures that we could use to help evaluate progress towards the MPO's goal areas. We'll also be building the MPO's capacity to use our travel demand model throughout our decision-making process through a scenario planning exercise. The beginning of FFY 2028 will focus conversations on the MPO's ideal capital investment structure, again implemented through the TIP, as we will identify discrete projects that will need to be included in our fiscally constrained plan. Once those activities have concluded, MPO staff will return to the board in 2028 to review an aggregate analysis of the recommended plan before releasing the document for its official public comment period and ultimately its endorsement. Next slide. And to conclude, I just wanted to leave you guys with a few key questions that are related to different elements of the plan that we will be reviewing in the next coming months. Related to the needs assessment, I encourage you to ask yourself how the region's transportation system is functioning. When we're talking about performance measures, please consider how we incorporate and measure and communicate progress in our goal areas. When talking about scenario planning, we ask you to consider how we incorporate uncertainties and flexibility in our planning practices. And then when considering our investment programs and projects, please consider which large-scale projects we will need to anticipate between now and 2050, and ultimately how we as an MPO would like to direct our regionally discretionary target funding. So some large questions will be coming ahead of you in the next 2 years. I look forward to the conversations that we are going to be having. And if you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them. But more than anything, again, looking forward to more as we go along.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, Ibu?
There's one
Go
quick
ahead,
one.
Lynn.
Yeah,
Of course,
thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, Aaron, any plans to review or update the criteria by which we score projects?
Absolutely. We can get more into that a little bit later. We are trying to maintain as much consistency with the TIP scoring as possible, and trying to make things as clear as possible when we communicate things to project proponents.
Yeah. And part of the reason I bring that up is because I know Allie, when she presented Division Zero, mentioned that we might want to, well, that we would want to look at our criteria in order to, boost that priority. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Aaron. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any?
One, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Sandy.
Thank you. As Mike mentioned, we are currently in an intensive public engagement phase for Focus 2050, our long-range plan. We have a public meeting open house style at La Colaborativa in Chelsea next Wednesday. Wednesday evening, I believe it's 5:30 to 6:30. Feel free to come by, spread the word around, reach out to me if you have any questions. Would love to get the word out and have folks drop by.
Thank you, Sandy. Lydia?
Thank you, Chair. As a relatively new member to the board, I wanted to actually just take a minute to introduce myself and thank members for welcoming me in and for Ethan and other staff for helping me understand some of the lay of the land. I'm Lydia Housley. I'm here representing the city of Boston. And in the same moment, I want to acknowledge Tom Ben for, I mentioned this at our TIPper meeting last week, but just thank you for stepping into the chair role. And at the same time, just take a minute to acknowledge the great work that Jen Rowe did on this board. And just for many years, I think was a really important player in collaborating with you all and especially in the TIP process and moving the MPO forward toward processes that help not only us fund projects that are regionally significant, but also make sure that we're working toward the fiscal constraint and realities of building projects in a region. So just wanted to say thank you.
Welcome. Thanks, Lydia. Anything else? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? So moved. Please state your name for the record, Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, MAPC. I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Hannah Swilikowski, MBTA Advisory Board, second.
Any objections?
No, but it was a lot of
We are
fun.
adjourned. Thank you all very much.